I'm
Okay.
already
Things on time.
Okay.
okay. So we're streaming.
So I should start talking now, right?
Once it's streaming, I don't.
Hey guys, welcome to the HRC Town Hall. Here is Jasmine.
Hello, hello, my beautiful people. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jasmine Craybill, and I serve on the board of Lancaster City's Human Relations Commission Board of Directors. Pandemic of 2020, we haven't been able to meet in person, but we wanted to be able to talk to the community and just let them know that we're still working to enforce our city's ordinance of non-discrimination. It has come to our attention that too many of our community members have no clue that we actually exist. So as part of Lancaster City's Human Relations Commission's board, there's a board of directors that is to be composed of 13 members appointed by the mayor with the prior approval of the council of the city. The members shall be broadly representative of the cultural, racial, economic, religious, gender, and physically impaired groups in the city. Members shall be residents of the city. The board, we are responsible for the development, implementation of programs, materials, workshops, seminars, and other educational endeavors which will promote good human relations among the diverse individuals and groups of the city, and which will help prevent unlawful discriminatory practices. The board works in concert with the commissioners in these and other administrative duties. It is hereby declared to be the policy of Lancaster City to promote the right and opportunity of all persons to participate in the social, cultural, recreational, and economic life of the city, and to assure equal opportunity for all persons without regard to race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, sex, age, familial status, sexual orientation, marital status, possession of a GED, handicap, or disability, or the use of a support animal. Recognized as and declared to be a civil right which shall be enforceable, right to freedom from discrimination and discriminatory practices, included but not limited to employment, housing, education, public accommodations, and lending which occur within the corporate limits of our city. Tonight's town hall focus is on the ordinance's language on unlawful housing practices, which would be any owner, real estate broker, or any other person to discriminate against any person by refusing to sell, lease, sublease, rent, assign, or otherwise transfer, or by refusing to negotiate the sale, lease, sublease, rental assignment, leasehold, or other interest in any housing, accommodation, or commercial property to any person, or by representing that any housing, accommodation, or commercial property is not available for inspection, sale, lease, sublease, or other transfer when in fact it is so available. You are not allowed to discriminate against or segregate. So with that in mind, we have a presentation that will take place and presented by one of our commission members discussing segregation and redlining here in Lancaster City in the history books. So we wanted to share a little bit background with that. Also in today's program, we have invited LHOP's Brittany Mellinger to speak about what's happening with housing, what are their hurdles, what resources there may be for people who are having difficulty or have been possibly affected by discriminatory behavior. She's going to discuss some resources that will help you look for housing here, which we know is a national problem, not only a Lancaster City problem for affordable housing. But we are here as the board members and the commission of the Human Relations Commission to provide the resources in the event that you do feel like you're being discriminated against. And so, like it's always been, knowledge is power, and knowing your resources and how to utilize those resources is even more powerful. So any person claiming to be aggrieved by an alleged unlawful discriminatory act may initiate, sign, and file with the Lancaster City Human Relations Commission a verified complaint in writing. Here on the screen, you see cityoflancasterpa.com. This is also where we would love to have other community members, city members join in with keeping our city great for all people and not just for a few people. And this is the way we can do that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mark Stoner, who has created this excellent program, which will probably be a couple surprises in there that most people didn't know about our city's history. But keeping us honest, here we go. Mark Stoner. You're muted.
Thank you, Jasmine. This presentation was just something I kind of started getting interested in, seeing other stuff on the web about the process of redlining you may have heard about, and how it was being recorded in some other cities. And so I just started to reach out on social media earlier this year to see if I could find local examples of that and kind of how it developed in Lancaster itself. And it's really kind of interesting how that happened, and it's pretty consistent with what happened in Lancaster with what happened elsewhere in the nation. There we go. So this all started back as far as the government getting involved. It was in 1929, you know, the stock market crashed, and it was the start of the Great Depression. And so because of that, Franklin Roosevelt was elected president, and he had the best of intentions. This is one of his quotes: "There should be an objective of government itself to provide at least as much assistance to the little fellow as it now is giving to the large banks and corporations." That sounds real familiar, I think, to modern day ears. So he started a lot of initiatives as soon as he was elected in 1932, and so became president in 33. And you may have heard of his first 100 days, where he started a lot of initiatives to help address all the problems that were happening in the US economy at that time. And so one of the things they started was the Homeowners Loan Corporation, or you'll see it abbreviated as HOLC. And that was started in 1933. And it was one of his New Deal agencies that the purpose was, you know, a lot of people were losing their home mortgages and being foreclosed. So the idea was that the government should help people get mortgages so that they wouldn't default on them, and that way avoid foreclosures. So when they started that, they decided that there should be boards in local communities that rated the different areas as to how good that area is to have a loan be taken out, because they were, worried about people defaulting on the loans that the government was helping support. So what they did, in 35, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board asked HOLC to survey the neighborhoods in 239 cities. And they did these things called residential security maps to gauge the risk in each market. So what you're seeing here is actually online. It's the map that was done for Lancaster. Basically, they rated the different areas. This crosshatch area is saying it's an industrial area, and some of this is saying it's thinly settled, but let me clean up. This is the same information on a more modern day map to make it a little bit easier. So basically the green areas is what they rated as A, which were the best areas. The blue areas were still desirable, kind of working class. Yellow meant it was an area that was declining, and red areas meant that they were dangerous or hazardous areas to give mortgages in. And that all sounds great to this point, except that one of the ways they determine whether an area was dangerous was whether it was mixed race. This is the underwriting manual that they used in 1936 to figure out how to do those. And the wording there says, the infiltration of inharmonious racial groups will produce the same effects as those which follow the introduction of non-conforming land use, which tends to lower the levels of land values and to lessen the desirability of residential areas. So I think it's important to realize that this wasn't just a tiny thing. It was really how all of society was looking at things back then. I'm sure you heard of the National Association of Realtors, and the organization that became that, their code of ethics from 1924, they had an article that said a realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individuals whose presence will clearly be detrimental to the property values in that neighborhood. So that was the ethical opinion then, that you should not allow a race to move in that could be detrimental to the value of the properties. So the other piece of this is, at the time, people had what were called racial covenants, and they were a tool where they would put a few lines of text in the deed to a house that would say that it was restricted, excuse me, to certain races, okay? And these kind of developed after 1917. There was a US Supreme Court ruling then that said, like, a city or a government agency couldn't couldn't have an ordinance that segregated land, like in zoning or something like that. So that was illegal, but it was still perfectly legal to have a private owner state that their land could not have members of certain races. So after 1917, a lot of developers started to putting these covenants in the deeds to do that, because basically they came in use into like new developments, like a city like Lancaster, where in a lot of areas you already had neighborhoods like what we'd see as the city neighborhoods. You know, someone could move into an area and decide, oh, this is a white neighborhood or this is a mixed race neighborhood, just by looking around at the people. So these racial covenants were used by developers who are building a new development because nothing's there yet. So they're having, you know, someone buy a house and move in just on the promise that this is going to be a a good place to live. So an example here is School Lane Hills, we're all familiar with, to the west of the city. So this is, kind of their brochure, their sales brochure that they handed out to new owners that says your investment in a home site in School Lane Hills is especially safeguarded by the high standards of development that is being maintained, by the unsurpassed location of the property, and by the environment created by a select group of purchasers and owners of homes in this distinctive community. So when you bought a home, then you got a deed, and in that deed, this is a real deed from School Lane Hills at the time, that says, at no time shall the herein conveyed premises or any parts thereof, or any building erected thereon, be occupied by any person or persons other than a member of the Caucasian race. This prohibition, however, is not intended to include the occupancy by a domestic servant or other person while employed in or about the premises by the owner or occupant of any land included herein. So you couldn't buy, but you could work there as a servant. And then, again, I got this sample from the Lancaster Historical Society, and then I reached out online and other people sent me some in. So the top one here is from 1928 in Grandview Heights, and it's almost exactly the same wording as what you saw on School Lane Hills. And then below that is Burroughs Avenue, which theirs is a little different. It says the premises can never be used for any purpose other than a private residence or dwelling, which may be owned, used, and occupied solely by members of the Caucasian race. And what's interesting about this is, okay, this is back to the map that the redlining was done. And if you look, the three we have, it's over here in School Lane Hills, it's the development over here, Burroughs Avenue, and up here in Grandview Heights. And I did find some more. There was a family that lived further west towards Millersville, and when they purchased the home, like in the 1980s, their deed still had a restriction to people of the Caucasian race, and they were a mixed race couple. So they had that. I think a lot of people are surprised that these restrictions are still there. And when I say they're still there, let me give you a little bit of the history. So these covenants are written into the deeds when the house is built and bought and sold. And in 1948, the US Supreme Court had a decision that they said that although they're private contracts, they're nonetheless unenforceable because of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So that was a milestone, but it didn't put a stop to their use, because even though they were no longer legally enforceable, there wasn't anything that said they were illegal. So people could still put them in the deeds, even if they didn't mean anything, and it wasn't illegal to do that. So their use was really still continued up until 1968. After Martin Luther King was shot, that year they passed the Fair Housing Act, and that prohibited the discrimination or sale, rental, or financing of dwellings and other housing related transactions based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex. And so that actually made it illegal to do that. And so after that, people really did stop doing it. And as far as real estate agents and things, people like that, it wasn't used. Although the wording, if you look in your old deed, many times that clause will still be there, because it's really hard to change the wording of an existing deed. That's like a separate legal thing you would have to do, and it's expensive. So usually they just say it's no longer valid, and it's let at that. But what you got to remember is there is still a legacy left from this, these racial covenants and the redlining. because historically, you know, the wealth that the individuals build a lot of times is in their the land they own, the house they own. It affects education because, you know, usually your local taxes are what go to pay for your schools, and so if your house isn't worth as much, you know, the schools tend to be not quite as good, things like that. So it really still resonates throughout our society. If you're interested in anything more, some of the sites that I went to originally, there's one called Mapping Prejudice, and it's in Minneapolis. It's a really, really cool site because there they've really did a crowdsource thing where they had tons of people go through old deeds and really try to map it out exactly where these racial covenants were. And they actually have an online map there where you can kind of see Minneapolis over time and which properties had racial covenants. And you see them, like, from the turn of the century start growing and covering larger and larger areas, covering, you know, the better areas that were being developed, things like that. There's also the site called Mapping Inequality. That actually is where I got the maps from. And you can go to any of the, you know, 200 plus cities in the US and see the maps that were created at that time. Another one that I found really interesting online is Newsday. Just recently did an investigation in Long Island real estate, where they actually sent people in to realtors to look at properties or to have what areas on Long Island the realtors would recommend. And they did it with both white, you know, people of many different races doing exactly the same thing, you know, coming in with basically the same profile as far as what money they had and things like that. And it's really interesting to see how, even though it's illegal, the racial bias still comes through, where the couples were recommended to look for property depending on their race and things like that. You know, we all hear things like, oh, this is a good neighborhood, or this is a good school district. And a lot of those still to this day are kind of race-based assessments. And then something that's a little bit lighter, but goes through a lot of this topic on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen the Adams Ruins Everything. There's one on the disturbing history of the suburbs, where they kind of act out what we covered today and how things have developed. And that's a little bit lighter if you're interested. So again, here's contact information. We have a phone line that you can always call and leave a message. We're just talking about housing tonight, but if you have any other example of discrimination in the city of Lancaster, we'd be happy to help with that. You can go online, you have to fill a complaint, and that would start the process. And please like us on Facebook. And there's a little, the city, if you go under commissions and bureaus, we're listed under that, and you can get all this information there too. So with that, I'm gonna stop my share. We're all back. And I think through this, Jasmine, we still on the feed on TCP. If anyone has any questions or anything, they can ask them there and they'll let us know, right?
Thank you so much for that, Mark. I know that was a lot of work that you put into sharing with the public, and you didn't have to do that. And you know, went one step further and wanted to bring that to people's attention, especially while we travel through this end of 2020 with so much unrest. It takes people like you to actually find the information and set it out there. I was hoping that maybe you could just give a brief overview, because you now serve on the commission, just a little small tidbit about what that function is in relation to the board, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Sure. The commission is 5 people from the community that if there is a case that accuses someone, like a public accommodations, like a restaurant or a landlord, of discrimination, we would actually be the board that you'd go in front of, and we would make a ruling about that discrimination. But now the whole goal of the City Human Relations Commission is to kind of resolve disputes, also kind of keep them. You don't have to have a lawyer necessarily and things like that. So it's a way people can help address a problem. And we do try to get both sides to come to some mutual agreement beforehand. You know, it's better if you can resolve it rather than have to make a ruling. But if it comes to that, the 5 people on the commission make those rulings. Okay. Oh, and the other thing I want to say about my presentation, if anyone after seeing this goes and sees that, you know, looks at their old deed and finds an example of it, I'd love if you'd take a photo of it and send it in to us or share it on Facebook with us.
Yes, I love the part about resolution. That's what we're about, resolution, and being a resource for people who may feel like they have no resource, especially when you think about, you know, fighting for your rights, getting an attorney. You can go to the website and you can make a formal complaint. And like Mark said, we like to try to resolve things, but we are the resource. One thing that Mark talked about, it really brought back to a conversation that I had with my manager. I currently am a licensed real estate agent here in the state of Pennsylvania, primarily in Lancaster, but during, again, this social unrest, there's been a lot of conversations with people, you know, your friends, your colleagues, and my manager shared something with me that really spoke to me, and I feel like she really saw me, and she really saw how systematic racism is something that's a thing. So she shared with me that her and her daughter were talking, and her daughter's a young person in high school, and she said to her mom, I don't understand, like, is racism a thing anymore? Like, there's no slave owners. And then my manager shared with me that when she bought her home, the seller of her home said that he wanted to frame his deed. And she said she didn't really pay much attention to that conversation, but then she realized that that deed had that same verbiage that Mark just shared with us in those slides that were back from 1950. Yes, not enforceable, but 1950, and it's 2020. So anyway, I'm glad that we are bringing the information to the public, and I wanted to now turn this presentation over to Brittany Mellinger. So LHOP, we have decided we want to make some partnerships here with the HRC board so we could be more effective and people know their resources. And I had a great conversation with Brittany, and I know she definitely has her job cut out for her during this time where people are losing their incomes. As a realtor, I do know that it's super hard to find houses to buy, much less houses to rent. And she's been doing a lot of work. I mean, she has to work on both ends of it. She's working with the landlords who also are posed with a really difficult problem of managing their investments and also not being, you know, trying to be fair, but also they also are having difficult times right now. So without any further ado, I know she has some really good content to share with you. Miss Brittany Mellinger.
Thanks, Jasmine, and thanks everyone for letting me join you tonight. I'm really excited to join you all and share a little bit of what we're seeing and experiencing. As Jasmine mentioned, this is a challenging time for everyone, and there's lots of challenges among the opportunities, but hopefully I can provide a broad picture of what we're seeing both with renters and with homeowners in Lancaster City tonight. And I think it was great that we started off with the presentation by Mark as well. It set a really great foundation for understanding where we've been with the policies and practices of the past and how it can continue to have impacts today. So I work at LHOP, Lancaster Housing Opportunity Partnership. As Jasmine mentioned, I'm the director of the Housing Equality and Equity Institute, which is our fair housing outreach and education branch. So we provide information, guidance, one-on-one consultations for folks. So if anyone does have questions after this presentation, they can feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat so that way it can get posted on Facebook as well. But as Jasmine mentioned, this is a really challenging time and the market is really tight right now. There's not enough affordable housing in order to keep up with the needs of the increasing population. During COVID, there hasn't been a whole lot of turnover in the market. So a lot of folks are staying put where they are in their rental housing, facing rising rents, some rental housing and rental properties that are being sold, which decreases the rental stock. So it really leaves a lot of renters who have been forced out of their housing with increasingly high barriers to get into housing, especially individuals that have an eviction history in the past, maybe a poor landlord reference due to a bad experience, poor credit, maybe a criminal history, low income, or even just lack of money for application fees. There are a number of barriers that can be really substantial when someone is seeking housing, and when a prospective landlord has 30 or 40 applications for any one unit, it can be hard to make the case to go for someone that may have a couple issues on their background. So what we find is that oftentimes many individuals that are having these barriers often fall under protected classes within fair housing, which would align quite closely with those in the Lancaster City Ordinance. So older adults, people of color, immigrant communities, women, households with children, people with disabilities, and more. So oftentimes you'll find that these folks may end up staying in properties with poor conditions and poor services that aren't getting the needed repairs that are being made because they don't have the resources or the access to quality, affordable, and available housing. So oftentimes we get calls from households that are dealing with really persistent mold, with broken appliances, with inadequate heat and plumbing. And unfortunately, it can be really difficult to address these issues if you're not working with a proactive landlord who's interested in providing quality services to a tenant. Of course, we know there are so many wonderful landlords and property managers that are working in Lancaster City and County, and I certainly don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but there are some that aren't taking enough care of their properties. And under Pennsylvania landlord tenant law, it can be difficult to access some of those remedies in a timely manner in order to have a safe and healthy home for yourself and your family. Of course, there is the Code Enforcement Office within Lancaster City, and Karen Bousquet and her team do a wonderful job. But when you bring code enforcement in, it can be challenging to maintain a positive relationship with your landlord. And you may be facing a termination of your lease or even condemnation of your unit. So there are risks with that as well. So there are a lot of challenges for tenants who are facing housing conditions that are less than ideal. When we look at additional impacts from COVID, we know that the people of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID and the resulting crisis, both in terms of health impacts as well as economic impacts of this crisis. So then when we're looking at housing jeopardization, increase of evictions, displacements, it's particularly challenging to find alternative housing. We're also seeing that there can be financial incentive for some landlords to sell their investment properties rather than recover lost funds if a tenant's not able to pay their rent. If they have protections due to an eviction moratorium, that's another alternative that sometimes landlords take, given the rental or the seller's market that there is right now. So there is a national fair housing focus on mitigating some of the effects of COVID-19 to ensure that there aren't increases in discrimination due to COVID-19. There is a lot of evidence that due to disasters, public health emergencies, natural disasters, things like that, there is often a rise in discriminatory events. So HUD is being proactive and is really trying to get the word out there to ensure that people are not being discriminated against due to the protected class in their housing due to this crisis. So an issue of concern would be hate crimes due to race and national origin, or discrimination in housing because of that. There is a perceived association between the disease and Chinese American or Asian Americans, but we know that that has nothing to do with individuals and their housing. So there should be no reason that a landlord or a property manager would deny someone housing because of their national origin. We've heard cases on a national level with sexual harassment from landlords, from property managers, from maintenance folk. You know, if someone's not able to pay their rent, they could be at increased pressure to be in a quid pro quo situation, forced to exchange sexual favors for rent, and that is also illegal. And that's also something that we want to make sure that people know their rights, that they do not ever have to exchange sexual favors because they owe their landlord rent. We want to make sure that people have understanding of their rights regarding reasonable accommodations for folks with disabilities. A reasonable accommodation is a change in policies for someone that needs that in order to be able to fully use and enjoy their housing. So for an individual with a disability that would be incredibly susceptible to COVID-19, this could be changing inspection requirements. Instead of having an in-person inspection that would put someone at risk, perhaps delaying that or doing it by video, delaying perhaps some maintenance that could be delayed in order to keep from putting folks at risk. It could also include changing policies for individuals who have gotten COVID, and it has, the complications has impacted their daily lives, their ability to work and go about their daily living. Of course, not everyone who's gotten COVID-19 would have symptoms that would qualify them as someone with a disability, but there certainly are cases out there. So they might be able to request no inspections during the quarantine period. Perhaps a different payment arrangement for rent if they've been unable to work and do childcare, to request extended time to be able to pay their rent. Perhaps an overnight caregiver if they need 24-hour care. So a tenant could request these changes in policies in order to be able to continue to stably be housed while they're going through this crisis. So we're working on developing a document to spread to the community. We're working on spreading this information by social media. We really want to make sure that people are fully aware of their rights, as well as housing providers are fully aware of their responsibilities under fair housing law. We want to make sure that both sides of the equation have same access to the information, because the last thing we want to do is be telling someone they're doing something wrong. I would much rather tell someone on the front end how to do something right. And to prevent a conflict from occurring and for someone to be experiencing discrimination. I also wanted to take a little bit of time tonight to talk about some programs that are in place to protect renters. So there is an eviction moratorium right now at the federal level put out by the CDC that protects certain renters from being evicted until the end of the year. So there's information on that on the CDC website, and I would encourage folks that think that they might be in jeopardy of eviction due to non-payment of rent because their income has been affected by COVID. And if you are in that case, please give my office a call. We can talk you through it. You would just need to sign a declaration form, give it to your landlord, and make sure that you're following the appropriate steps to be covered under this protection, because it is available and we do want to make sure that folks have this information. There are also some community resources for rental assistance, since we know there are so many folks that have had their income disrupted by COVID-19. So there was a rental relief program that was available through the state through the beginning of this month that has ended, but the Eviction Prevention Network, which is a group of local social service agencies throughout Lancaster City and Lancaster County, has picked up right where that stopped. So even though that program, which I know has been covered in the news and that deadline has been covered in the news, I wanted to let folks know that even though that's passed, there are still resources, and folks can call 211 or talk to any of the agencies that are involved with that program and to access that assistance if they're eligible for it. So in summary, there are a lot of challenges that are facing us as we're working with renters, as we're being renters ourselves, even for housing providers, as landlords are dealing with decreased income as well. It's a hard time all around, but there are resources. We've got lots of information, lots of education, and we would love to be able to assist. So if anyone has questions, they can feel free to call our Fair Housing line. They can reach our office at 717-291-9945. We do one-on-one consultations all the time, but we can also do a more detailed training if folks would like. But I didn't want to leave tonight without talking a little bit about what's happening on the home buyer side as well. LHAP doesn't only serve tenants and landlords. We also serve as prospective home buyers, and we know that there's a tight market on that end as well. There's a shortage of available housing stock, which means it's a seller's market, and the houses are going really quickly. So that can be a really big challenge for buyers that have fewer resources. They may be banked approved and fully able to get a mortgage and to buy that house, but with so many folks with cash in hand able to access housing, it can be a challenge to compete for those few houses that are out there. And utilizing assistance programs such as LHAP's first-time homebuyer program, or if you're working with a government-backed loan or other factors, can kind of slow down that process a little bit. So it can be a challenge. But LHAP does have a first-time homebuyer course, and we encourage folks to access that, to understand the process, to understand how to be prepared, have all of your ducks in a row, have all of that documentation together. To get that pre-approval in advance, especially if you're working with a closing cost assistance program. So that way you're fully equipped and that you can stand up for yourself and understand your programs and act really proactively. I know it's a challenge right now to be able to access this. I know for folks that are expecting the housing search to take 2 to 3 months, it might be taking 9 months or more. But please reach out if you have questions, if you like assistance. Miriam Soto is our Director of Lending, and she has a wonderful wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure she'd be willing to help. So with that, I think I'm at time. I don't want to go over because I know there might be questions and answers, and I want to make sure that we've got plenty of time for that.
Brittany, could you just repeat the LHAP number one?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is 717-291-9945. And what I'll do is I'll put our contact information in the chat so that way that can go on Facebook Live as well.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Brittany Mellinger, for sharing that wealth of information. This is what these town hall meetings are hoping to do, is create partnerships with our community members, community outlets for people, for resources. The more that we know, the more people we can help, we can reach. And going off of what Brittany said, of course, you know, if within this time you are feeling like you are discriminated against, we do have our hotline, which you can find on the Lancaster City's Human Relations Commission's Facebook page. If you have interest in partnering with us, we welcome partnerships. We want to be connected to as many people as possible in our community. We want everyone to be included and feel safe and feel like Lancaster is great for all. I don't know if other people have some questions before we end this, but I very much am looking forward to our next town hall meeting, which we will be planning for the new year. This was our first run at it. But we really hope that it was impactful and it gave you some information, and you're able to even reach out to the HL or the Lancaster City's Human Relations Commission, the board, reach out to Brittany Mellinger at LHOP, just being completely connected in this time where we really need to be as connected as possible, I guess, at 6 feet apart or maybe even further. But nonetheless, again, we thank everyone for joining. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to any one of us. And we do welcome more people to come and serve because, like we said, the more the merrier. So did we have any questions?
Well, I did want to share a couple of comments that we received.
Fantastic.
Yep. Kelsey Schaefer says, thanks for sharing this. I read The Color of Law this summer, and I've been wondering what redlining looked like in the city. So that was a nice visual for everyone to have.
Yeah, and actually that book, The Color of Law, is really, really an excellent book. I highly recommend it. So
I've been hearing a lot about that. And I just wanted to add too, there is a rather scholarly and academic book by David Schuyler, who was a professor at FNM. And that also goes into some of the population issues in redlining in Lancaster City. It's older, but it's another good one. Gary Brown says that redlining is still happening in some places, and he thanks Mark for your presentation. Wilden Lane says, thank you for the education. And let me see, I think, so we've gotten quite a few thank yous. Laura Pauls Thomas says thank you. And Allison Feuder Hutchison says, can you search for deeds through the county office? I'm curious about a house that we used to own on Wheatland Avenue. And I can actually answer that, and I can tell you that, yes, you can search for deeds on the Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds website. It's actually pretty easy to use. They give you the image and everything. You have to log in as a guest if you don't have an account, but you can do it. And if you call them, they're also very, very helpful at the office there. And I think, let's see. Those were all the comments so far. And lots of thank yous and great presentations to Mark. And you too, Brittany, thank you.
I did want to just mention and clarify, if you are outside the city in Lancaster County, LHOP is able to provide information about fair housing rights and connect you with an enforcement agency, even though there isn't a Human Relations Commission for the whole of Lancaster County. So just wanted to mention that since I neglected to do that in my presentation.
Yeah, and that's one difference between us. The Human Relations Commission is a city commission, so we can only address complaints that happen within the city of Lancaster. We often get calls from outside the area. There used to be a county Human Relations Commission, but they killed that about 10 years ago.
But there is still a state Human Relations Commission. So if you're outside the city, you can contact the state.
Yeah, and one of the things, the City Human Relations Commission does cover gender identity and sexual orientation. So if you're an LGBTQ person, you can pursue those in the city for, housing or public accommodation or education. If you're elsewhere in Lancaster County, you can't make a complaint on those cases, except for recently it was ruled illegal in employment. So they are covering sexual orientation and gender identity through the state now. That's my understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is in housing at the state level, they look at it through the protected class of sex. And because people are in same-sex relationships, it would be looked at under sex, but they still do offer those protections, even though it isn't explicit like it is in the city's human relations ordinance.
Did you
Is
see the
that
one
it?
question for Brittany in the chat?
Oh, I'm pasting it now.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't want to do it twice if Brittany got it, so I was trying to give her a little bit of time.
Sorry, is that in the Facebook or the Zoom chat?
In the Facebook chat, I have it.
Oh, okay, I see. Can I explain more about the rental assistance program that replaced the one that ended at the beginning of November? Absolutely. So there was an existing network of social service providers that were working to prevent evictions because we understand how traumatizing of an event and eviction can be for a household and how difficult it can make finding future housing. But since COVID-19, there have been additional resources that have become available. We've gotten additional funding and expanded our network of providers. So I am going to put a link in the chat to where someone can get more information about how to access that. So someone would have to have had some disruption to their household due to COVID-19 to access this rental assistance. But it could be up to several months of assistance that someone could be eligible for, either for rental arrears or for ongoing rental needs. And they would be meeting with a case manager or a financial counselor to make sure that they're able to access all resources that are available to that household to get them stabilized and keep them stably in their housing. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up that link for you. And that assistance also, that would go directly to the landlord, not to the tenant. So we do see this as a program for landlords as well. So if there are landlords on the call too that have tenants that could use assistance, we really encourage them to reach out and to connect them with the eviction prevention network. So that way we can help stabilize their income as well as stabilize the tenants that are in their property. It's a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with government agencies, people assume they're going to be one side or the other. And I think both our organizations really try to look out for everyone. You know what I mean? It's not just a one-sided system.
Absolutely.
So that was
So
fun.
yeah, that was great. I guess if we have more questions, but in the meantime, I definitely wanted to give a shout out to TCP Network for making this happen for us and pulling this off without a hitch. We kind of pulled this together, but pretty quickly, and Miss Whitney Lupton, she made it happen for us and made us look real good. Thank you, TCP Network. Another great outlet for information here in Lancaster City. They're doing great things in bringing information to the public. They have so many resources and partnerships. And again, you know, we're just very, very grateful for their generosity of making this happen for us on a Wednesday evening. Again, if you, the public, has anything, any questions about this presentation, if you have any ideas for further town hall meetings, please visit our Facebook page. Like we said, we are definitely looking for the partnerships and connecting the resources, especially now where things are going to look a little different on how we all can connect as a community, but so long as we stay connected as a community. How are we looking on the questions and comments?
Looking pretty good.
The
I
one,
don't think we have.
Brittany, the rental homeowner assistance link, for some reason that doesn't seem to be going. It's in the comments for, I picked up what you had put in the Zoom comments and put them in the Facebook comments, but it doesn't look like it's connecting.
Oh, I put it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I pulled that straight off the website. Let me double check it. So you're getting an error message when you're putting that in?
Yeah, I'll delete mine so
Ah.
it doesn't confuse.
Yeah, I can see it, but
Okay. As
But,
long as someone has it there.
yeah. At any rate, I don't think we have any other additional comments or questions. Unless anybody else sees any that I don't.
Nope. Brittany, thank you. You really did a great job there.
Yes. Thank you to everyone. I look forward to the next one.
Me too.
Everybody
Yeah.
stay safe and remember it's extra give this coming week.
Yes, extra
Yeah.
give starting tomorrow, I guess, right?
Yep. Friday. Is today Thursday?
Yeah.
Friday, yeah.
Don't they start at midnight on Thursdays for the extra
Well,
give?
Well,
Or no?
Technically
well, I think
Friday,
it's
but yeah.
midnight Thursday night. That's Friday.
Oh, which
Right.
is actually Friday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's all a blur. It's all a
I
blur.
know, especially these days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, I guess give if you can give.
But I mean, just to clarify, we don't have a mechanism for extra give to the Human Relations Commission. I mean, I guess technically you could, but you'd have to take a check.
Yeah, no, we're not a
Right. Yeah.
we're
So
not
we're
a
not part of it.
501c3. Yeah.
Yeah.
LHOP
Okay.
is participating.
Yeah.
I would be-
LHOP is, but
I would be, they would yell at me if I didn't plug that real quick. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah, do it.
If
Do
you are
it.
interested, definitely.
Yep. So
Uh,
yeah, I think we're all set on the comments, and I guess we're right on time.
Well, good night, everyone.
Thanks
Yes.
for joining, everybody.
Thank